Welcome to the Eat This Book podcast. I'm Michael Whitworth. Each day we take a small piece of scripture and we sit with it. Not a quick snack that disappears before lunch, not a chore you check off of a list, but rather a meal meant to be savored. So pull up a chair. Let's eat. Welcome to episode 37, where we're talking about Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 through 18. Lot chose first. Abram had given him the choice. Any direction you want, take it. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw the Jordan Valley, well-watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, and chose it for himself. And he moved toward Sodom. Abram was left with whatever remained, the hills, the rocks, the less obvious blessing. But then God spoke, "Lift up your eyes." The same action Lot just took. Lot lifted his eyes and chose what looked good. Now God tells Abram to lift his eyes, but this time to receive what God gives. Same posture, different outcome, because what you see depends on who's doing the showing. Look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. Every direction, not just the valley Lot took, not just what's left over, all of it. North, south, east, west, the whole land. Everything Abram can see from where he stands. Lot chose a portion. Abram receives the whole. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. This is the promise expanding again. Back in chapter 12, God said he would show Abram a land. In chapter 12, verse 7, God said he would give the land to Abram's offspring. Now, after Lot has taken his piece, God says, all of it, everything you see, for you and your offspring forever. Lot's choice didn't diminish Abram's inheritance. If anything, it clarified it. The valley Lot grabbed, it's still part of the promise. Lot is just borrowing it, if you will. Here's the principle. You can't outgive God. Abram gave Lot first choice. He surrendered his rights as the elder. He let his nephew take the best-looking land. He absorbed the loss. And God responded by giving Abram everything. The one who gave up his rights received more than he gave up. The one who released his grip found his hands full. The one who let go got it all. This is how the kingdom works. Jesus will say, "Whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." The path to gaining is through releasing. The way up is down. The last shall be first. Abram didn't know he was living out a kingdom principle. He just knew that strife wasn't worth it. He just knew that peace with his nephew mattered more than prime real estate. And God honored that surrender with a gift beyond calculation. "I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted." Dust, uncountable, everywhere. Later, God will say stars. Here, he says dust. Both images point to the same reality. More descendants than Abram can imagine. A family beyond numbering. And remember, Abram still has no children. Sarai is still barren. The promise of offspring, like dust, is spoken to a man with zero offspring. This is faith territory, believing what you cannot see, trusting a promise that contradicts your circumstances. "Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." God doesn't just want Abram to see it, he wants Abram to walk it. Get up, move, put your feet on this ground, trace the boundaries, feel the dirt under your sandals. This is yours. In the ancient world, walking through a territory was a way of claiming it. God is inviting Abram to take symbolic possession of what has been promised. But notice, it's still future tense. I will give it to you. Not I have given, not it's yours right now. The promise is certain, but the fulfillment is still coming. Abram will walk the land, but he won't own it. He'll live in it as a stranger, dwelling in tents. He'll buy a burial plot eventually. That's the only real estate he'll ever hold title to. The promise is sure, but the timing is God's. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Abram responds to the promise with movement and worship. He moves his tent. He's still a pilgrim, still portable, still living in temporary structures. But he moves toward what God has shown him. And he builds an altar, again. Every major moment in Abram's journey is marked by an altar. Shechem, Bethel, and now Hebron. Worship is the rhythm of his life. The oaks of Mamre will become significant. This is where Abram will be sitting when 3 visitors arrive with news about Isaac. This is where he'll negotiate with God over Sodom. This is the base of operations for the rest of his story. By the oaks of Mamre, at Hebron, where the father of faith built an altar and settled in to wait for the promise. Let's step back and see the contrast between Lot and Abram in this chapter. Lot lifted his eyes and saw what looked good to him. Abram lifted his eyes at God's invitation and saw what God was giving. Lot chose for himself. Abram received from God. Lot moved toward Sodom. Abram moved toward Hebron. Lot's choice will lead to disaster. Captured in war, rescued by Abram, then barely escaping Sodom's destruction with his life. Abram's receiving will lead to blessing. The covenant, the promise, the offspring. The one who grabbed got less. The one who released got more. There's something here about how we make decisions. Lot evaluated with his eyes. The valley looked well watered. It reminded him of Egypt, of Eden. He made his choice based on appearance, on immediate benefit, on what seemed best for his flocks and his future. He didn't ask God. He didn't consider the character of Sodom. He didn't weigh the spiritual cost. He just saw and chose, and he ended up in Sodom. Abram, by contrast, waited. He gave Lot first choice, which meant he couldn't optimize for himself. He accepted whatever was left, and then God spoke. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take yourself out of the driver's seat. Stop calculating. Stop grabbing. Let others choose first, and watch what God does with your open hands. So here's what Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 through 18 would have us savor today. If you've been grasping, if you've been fighting for your rights, protecting your share, making sure you get what's yours, this passage invites you to release. Abram gave Lot first choice and received everything. You can't outgive God. If you've lost something, if someone else took what you thought was yours, if you feel like you got the short end, this passage says, lift up your eyes. God's gifts aren't limited by what others take. What he has for you isn't diminished by what they grabbed. Look north, south, east, west. The promise is bigger than the loss. And if you're still waiting, if the promise is clear but the fulfillment is distant, if you're walking land you don't yet own, this passage says keep moving, keep worshiping, keep building altars. Abram lived in tents his whole life. He never held the deed, but he walked the land, and one day his offspring possessed it. Lot lifted his eyes and chose Sodom. Abram lifted his eyes and received everything. Same action, different orientation. One looked for what he could get. The other looked for what God would give. The grabber ended up fleeing a burning city. The releaser became the father of nations. Arise, walk through the land, north, south, east, west. All of it, for you, for your offspring, forever. Next time on Eat This Book, Genesis chapter 14. Lot's choices finally catch up with him. The city he moved toward falls. Kings go to war, and Lot is carried off as a prisoner. Abram could have said, "You chose this." Instead, he arms 318 men, rides into enemy territory, and risks everything to bring his nephew home. It's a story about grace, costly rescue, and what family does when someone walks into trouble. That's Genesis 14, Rescuing Lot. Thanks for eating with me. Until next time, may the Word dwell in you richly.